recession-proofing your business isn't about fear. It's about positioning. It's about being ready for that next downturn. So if something happens, you're in a more stable position. We're going to have things like AI that are going to impact you. But if we can have a business that's our own, we're not dependent on corporations. We can have it in an industry that it's a need, it's not a want. They're protected from all the cycles. They're just need-based businesses. That's a big thing.
Welcome to the Hire Yourself Podcast, the show for senior level executives who are done renting their income and are ready to take control of their future. My name is Gilfillan. I spent decades in the corporate America before hiring myself, becoming an entrepreneur, best-selling author, and a franchise consultant. Now I help others stop relying on one paycheck, one job, and one boardroom decision. If you're ready to take control of your destiny, to build wealth, and to live life on your own terms, then you're in the right place.
Welcome to the Hire Yourself Podcast, a show for high-performing executives that are ready to take control of their destiny, to build wealth, and to live life on their terms. If you ever felt like no matter how hard you work, no matter how well you perform, the future is always tied to the forces completely outside of your control. Yeah, that's it. A corporation, right? You're not alone. Today's episode, we talk about how close that hits home. I'm Pete Gilfillan. I'm a franchise consultant and entrepreneur, the founder of Hire Yourself. Before this chapter in my life, I spent 20 years in the corporate America. And I worked for large companies like Ford Motor Company and Terex. And they were great companies. They were in different industries, but there was one very consistent pattern between the two industries, that economic cycles dictated everything. What I experienced with Ford and Terex is that there were times of expansion, growth, opportunity, and there were times of contraction, uncertainty, restructuring, and none of it was under my control. And I was living through these cycles again and again, and I realized something. No matter how successful I became inside the system, I didn't control the system. And that's when I made the decision to step away from corporate America and become an entrepreneur through franchise ownership. It's not because I wanted more risk, because I wanted to control the risk. I wanted to be more in control of my life. So my mission now is to help executives take the same path that I did, to strategically look at franchising in a way in which you can go and be in control of your life. So this podcast gives you clarity, confidence, to remap this transition from corporate dependency to ownership and control, income to scalable wealth, external risk to strategic positioning. So the question we're going to focus on today is, how do you recession-proof your legacy by transitioning from being a corporate executive, that volatility, into a proven recession-resistant franchise business? Let me take you back a moment. See, my times in the corporate world, it felt incredibly stable. I was a strong performer. I had a great career. I had confidence in the future, and then it all changed overnight. Markets changed, priorities changed, decisions were made, and suddenly what I felt was stable wasn't anymore, and it happened. I was with Ford Motor Company, and I'll never forget the day. My boss called and offered me a separation package. Now, my blood was blue. I lived my life for Ford Motor Company. I loved working for Ford Motor Company. I was a top performer. I ran large organizations. But the day my boss called and offered me the separation package, that was the day that I realized that everything I worked for, kind of that stability, my legacy, all that was in question. And I decided that the stability of the corporate world was just an illusion. And I learned the hard way, right? And through those cycles, and that last one, early 2007, I decided that was not the path that I want to take, and to focus on other things. So control becomes more valuable than compensation. At a certain point, it's not about the money and all the benefits. Yeah, those are nice, but it's about reducing that dependency, that shift from being, this idea of being under control where the corporation has control to business ownership where you're in control. You're not gambling anymore. It's a specific strategy where you're in control. So whether the cycles are up or down, we're in a good economy, bad economy, when you have a business, you're not at the whim of a company. And so that's why franchise ownership made sense to me. It wasn't starting from scratch. I wanted a proven system. I wanted the playbook. I wanted to have a business that they had already kind of figured out all the mistakes. And franchising gave me those steps, that path to go from being a corporate executive to launching my own business or becoming an entrepreneur. And real resilience exists in this idea that when you become a business owner, it's clear that you are in charge. And when I decided to invest in a business, I focused on businesses that I knew that if we had up cycles or down cycles, no matter what, these businesses were needed. So I looked at home care services, I looked at restoration, I looked at health and wellness, I looked at essential services. And ultimately, I kind of decided to focus on junk rule franchise because I knew that that would be kind of more stable during economic cycles from that standpoint. So during my time in the corporate world, I thought it was amazing. But today I can tell you that no matter what happens in the economy, I am always engaged in terms of helping people to take control like I did. And what we're seeing now is that with the advent of AI, there's more and more shifting going on. So we had to worry about up cycles and down cycles in the economy. Now we have to worry about AI shifting, meaning AI is taking away a lot of white collar jobs. And so we're seeing a shift more towards blue collar sectors. That doesn't mean that as a corporate executive, you need to become a plumber or an HVAC technician. But this idea is you can go invest in a business that has blue collar tendencies so that that business cannot be eliminated by AI. You are in a much safer position, or I'll call it a little bit more stable. And the idea is that recession-proofing your business isn't about fear. It's about positioning. It's about being ready for the next downturn. So if something happens, you're in a more stable position. We're going to have things like AI that are going to impact you. But if we can have a business that's our own, we're not dependent on corporations. We can have it in an industry that it's a need, it's not a want. They're protected from all the cycles. They're just need-based businesses. That's a big thing. So I spent nearly 20 years in the corporate world. It took me a long time to figure out that I didn't have to ride the cycles. I didn't have to worry about future trends. If I went and found a business that allowed me to solve a need, that was something that was going to always be there, that I could satisfy customers, I can employ good people, I was protecting my legacy, protecting my future. And that was so important. And that's what I encourage a lot of executives as we enter these worlds of all this change, these cycles up and down, wars, economic change. Bottom line is we have a lot of stuff going on. So if any of this resonated with you, you hear what I'm saying, I encourage you to take 15 minutes. Go to hireyourself.com. Schedule a 15-minute call with me. Tell me a little bit more about your situation. I'll tell you about my free franchise consulting services, and I'll certainly talk to you about, is franchising even a potential path for you? Now, again, my job is to always be there to teach you, educate you, to learn about franchise business ownership. I always encourage you to follow and like my podcast.